Um, okay. Right, I'm going to get started because I think we probably do have a few more people to join us. But for those of you who are already here, I don't want to hold you up, and we've got a lot of really exciting things to get through. So I will make a start. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, Evolving Higher Education, Teaching the Engineering Students of Today. So before we really get into it, just a tiny bit of housekeeping. We will be recording, in fact, we are currently already recording this session so that we can distribute it afterwards. So just for your information, we very much welcome questions for Francesco and John, and indeed Sean, or any of us. So please do use the Q&A function in the kind of taskbar in the toolbar to do that. And we will have time at the end to put some of those questions to our lovely speakers, and if appropriate, we'll try and bring them in as we go. But if not, we'll definitely try and get to them at the end. So please do use that functionality. So in this session, we're going to be looking at how teaching and learning needs to adapt to the students and the environment of today, which we know are significantly different to 10 and even to 5 years ago. And we're privileged today to be joined by Dr. John Mulvihill, who is currently the course director for the BE and ME Biomedical Engineering programme at the University of Limerick, as well as being a senior lecturer in this discipline. And also by Dr. Francesco Del Giudice, who is an associate professor in chemical engineering and head of the Rheological Microfluidic Lab at Swansea University Bay Campus. So thank you both very much for joining us today. So both John and Francesco are sort of long-term users of our Connect courseware platform, and they'll be talking us through how they've adapted a hybrid approach to teaching and learning using some of the tools and the facilities in Connect to help them address challenges such as student engagement, exam anxiety, and student preparedness for class. But before we really get into that, I just wanted to delve a little bit into the title of this webinar, so Teaching the Engineering Student of Today. So what do we mean by this? And almost where is the emphasis? Is it on student? Is it on today? Or is it on both? So I wanted to go to Francesco first, if that's okay. Over to you, Francesco.
Thank you very much, Ross. That's for the kind introduction. And thank you very much to everyone listening to this webinar and to all of you that will be looking the recording of this webinar. Basically, that's a very interesting and provocative question. Is it about the students or is it about today? And while I was thinking about this question, it came back to my mind. And one of the kind of an anecdote when I was a student, so it was one of my first lectures in calculus 17 years ago. And my lecturer was old, so it was like in his 60s, okay? But these people that are very hard to retire in some way, but it was an excellent professor. And it was like, yeah, student attitude today is very different. Until, 10 years back, you could expect everybody seated there in the lecture. The lecturer would arrive, and they would all stand up, waited for the lecturer to reach the desk. They would all be seated and be silent for the duration of the lecture. Now instead, this is not seen any longer. And I'm now thinking, going in nowadays that I am a lecturer and I'm an associate professor, walking in the room and people show up late. So, basically, going back to that time, is this something wrong with the students? Is something wrong with me? Or is it just the time that has changed? And basically, after a few years that you keep doing that, and you keep observing how the behavior of students has changed, you start to realize that the students per se, the fact of the willingness of study, of learning is still there. So the student, in terms of etymology of the word from the ancient Latin, has stayed the same. What actually has changed is how do we actually, our students are learning today, and what are their priorities today. So this is like the first thing that that kind of was came across my mind. And there are really few things that have changed. When I studied at university, and when generation before me studied at university, the key point was the textbook. So the textbook was where you could get your information. You go to a lecture to basically try and understand better what the content of the textbook was, but the textbook was the center of everything. If we now look at this nowadays with the introduction of social media and the fact that now informations are available in bytes, even books like can be available in bytes of blinks, if you wish like to go down that road, then you start to realize that what you deal with is generally students that have that are difficult to engage for longer time. You have to find the exactly right means to actually do that. And what we have observed is that the textbook per se is not any longer the total answer. So many people are saying, well, then probably, we should get rid of textbook. Probably this is not what we want to look at. I think this is not the approach to actually follow, because the textbook still is a source of information. Maybe the problem is what we intend, what we mean by textbook, that needs to be adapted. So can we then bring all the novelty in technologies that there are today, the capacity of adapting to the individual student, and basically embed this within the textbook? Because if you're able to do that, then it's not any longer the textbook, is the how we convey that same message. So it's not the textbook, is what we mean by textbook that is going to change. And I personally believe that that's where Connect has actually favored this transition, has helped student and instructor in doing so.
Yeah, so it's getting that quality content across, but maybe using different vehicles than just the stereotypical, the standard printed phone book kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you, Francesco. And over to you, John. Same question.
I agree with everything Francesco said there. So for me, it's about looking at the problem through the lens of the student first, as well as my own lens. So selfishly, my job is to try and expedite the whole process, so I can engineer more time for research. But from the student's point of view, we don't realize how much technology is being thrown at them. In our university, a student could have 2 different modules in the same course that utilize completely different software. So in their very first year, they want to engage, they want that textbook, they want to listen to the lecture, but then all of a sudden it's Moodle, Sakai, Brightspace, all being thrown at them all in one go. And you can really see how difficult it is for today's student. Even in the past couple of years with AI and COVID and everything, it's just been a whirlwind of information and noise. So as Francesco said, these little bite-sized things are something that they can literally sink their teeth into, rather just being thrown this book or thrown this software and saying, go figure it out. So I can really understand from their point of view, the students of today, that that's their issue. And finding something that can go across all these modules, a technology like Connect, where they can go, here's my book, that can integrate with Brightspace, can integrate with Sakai, that is part of this familiar software that they just click on and they feel, okay, I recognize this. This is not something I'm going to have to relearn. And further to that point as well is that with Connect, for me, it's making those bite-sized pieces of text so that I can engage with the students saying, hey, this is the text I want you to read this week. So that they go, instead of here's a book, go read it, I'm going to highlight to them for this week and this week alone, this is the content I want you to learn and engage with. So it's about taking all this whirlwind of information and technology, condensing it down into this, and I can engage with them and tell them this is all you need to do today, this week. That's, for me, the most important thing for students of today.
Yeah.
May I add just one thing, like on
Yeah,
top
of course.
because John, you may actually come with a very interesting thought. In my opinion, is you always associated, when people outside from the world of academia think about lecturer or professor, etc. There's always the image of the ivory tower. So we locked ourselves in, but universities are not the same as what they were a few years back. they are way more complicated now compared to what were before. And similarly, our students are way more complicated and embedded in societal problem compared to when we were a few years back. You're talking about people leaving their family, relocating to a new place, at the same time, not just studying, no, keeping up job, dealing with some external factors such as cost of living crisis, etc., living in a world where environment now is getting more and more something into where getting a degree is not enough any longer, because you need to develop skill, digital skill, additional skills. Otherwise, you won't stand out from the crowd. So the student per se is also a more complicated entity now compared to what was a few years back. And that's why there is a belief that technology is actually going to help us transition to what is required for now.
I think you've articulated that so well, Francesco. And actually, I was thinking back to my own student experience, which, shall we just say, was in the last century. But, in many ways, I think that even I, in sort of the last century, in my first year, I was perhaps not as committed as you might imagine that I would have been. I did as much as I needed to get through. I missed lectures because I'd been out in the student bar the night before and what have you. So I think in some ways, students are probably the same as they ever were. But what you've articulated so well is the huge amount of pressure, really, that I think is on these students today that I certainly didn't feel back in my day. I wasn't paying huge amounts for my degree, for starters. There weren't quite so many of these complex, knotty, wicked world problems, or at least not that we were aware of. And and tech, well, I didn't even have an email account until the final year of my degree, and I didn't have a mobile phone until after I graduated. So all of that kind of stuff was not on my radar. So it's really interesting. Of course, students live in a completely different world today to the one that I inhabited back then. So with that in mind, I know that you've both put together some really interesting presentations about your usage of Connect and what kind of problems and challenges you were trying to solve when you started thinking about Connect, and what kind of results that you've seen since. And I know that both of your stories are equally fascinating. So we did toss a coin earlier. And so we've decided that purely on the basis of the coin, Francesco is going to go first. So thank you very much, Francesco. Over to you.
Okay, so basically, this is going to be about why we started to use Connect in here in the module that I teach, which is fluid mechanics for engineering. So it was for aerospace, mechanical, chemical, and biomedical engineers in year 1 and year 2. Okay. So the first thing that we wanted to basically started to look at is how do our students look in the classroom. I don't know how many of you actually empathize with this image that is there, where you can find around one person that is getting what you are trying to tell them. A few of them that seems pretty puzzled, and some of them that really are completely disengaged. Sometimes we may start to think about, oh my God, what's their problem? And then if we instead go on a slightly deeper level of analysis, we start to understand is, what are we really asking our students to actually do during this lecture time? In the standard lecture framework, what we are asking them is, I'm presenting you now a new concept and maybe many new concepts within the next 45 minutes. You're supposed to learn them within a kind of 15 minutes window. We are talking about the same people that a year before, okay, I'm talking about year 1 now. So a year before, they were in school where the pace of learning was much slower because they need to build up over years that knowledge. We are now asking them to do a similar thing on more complicated topics, often in a way reduced amount of time. So they're coming from school, and they have also other problems related to social mobility. If we consider even international students, they are in a new country with a new culture. They're even trying to figure out some basic needs like, I don't know, the doctor, or how do I get a mobile phone? So that's what we're talking about. And we're asking them on top of this to basically learn with such an immediacy. And yes, also students want to have fun. So if they are recovering from a night before, it's all difficult to convey a new message in that framework, standard framework. So we started to look at flipped class approach, where students can actually prepare some materials at home in their own time. Okay, so they can do pre-reading, do some practice problem by themselves with the support of additional material from the lecturer, or with the availability of some excellent pieces of technology that we're going to discuss today to basically do these bits of preparation. So that when they arrive in class, they are not like blank. They actually have had the time to actually look at those topics and then basically familiarize with themselves with the topic, so that we can actually address some more complex problems during the lecture. And you see that actually the engagement is higher. Okay. Of course, there always is that thing going around. I said, yeah, right. But are they really going to do that pre-reading or that problems at home? So how do you actually monitor that? In fairness, when we started at the beginning on this path, we couldn't. So we couldn't basically try and do that until we started to investigate existing platform and software that could actually do that. And before I actually go that, there was always also the question, does really the flipped class approach work? So this has been from a paper published in 2019. And you see passive in light gray and active in black. And you can see that basically the students were kindly not too much in favor of the flipped class approach. However, when it went to the test of learning, you can clearly see how the two columns were swapped. So students actually performed way better. And the key was because they had more time to actually absorb that content in their own time. So the time value, the value of that time actually increased for the students. So we started to use Connect for the flipped class approach. Why we wanted to use Connect? First of all, because you can set up many things. You can set up reading assignment where you have a smart book, which I'm going to present in a second. You can also set up practice problem from an extensive question bank, so in which students also have access to solution. What do you see here is the type of engagement. So 48 are those students that basically never engaged with the system. And this is down to students that actually enrolled on the first day, but then they dropped out because of the outcome from the first term. Okay, plus some others that didn't join the module until a bit later because of visa issue and other type of constraint. But look at 457 that actually completed and 434 completed. You may say, why then the third one was at 35? Well, just few people actually did that, because here there is a key difference of how making a flipped class approach working, and is basically to make it linked to a coursework component. So students get marks because the time is valuable. So they want to get marks. And for the first one and the second one, there were marks. For the third one, there were not marks yet, because those ones were instead recovered when they were preparing for the class test. So the ability of Connect and the capacity of Connect here is not only from the lecturer point of view, the access to resources that student can actually use, but it's also in the type of adaptive learning technology linked to the reading and the tailored support they can get when they do the practice. And to clarify this, I have a very quick example. So this is how a reading assignment would look like. The standard textbook is the one all in kind of black. But how can I tell the student exactly what they have to learn? If I set up some of the learning outcome that I want to cover, and you can do this directly in Connect, you see that automatically some parts are highlighted in yellow. The very great thing about this is that you can study it, okay, and this is how the whole reading works. Then you can actually answer questions on that topic. If you don't answer the first one, and you want to read more, basically the software will tell you exactly where to go and read that part. And once that you have actually responded correctly to the question, and by the way, you get a different question every single time that is decided automatically by the software, so it's very difficult to cheat, then this one becomes green, and you have that learning secured. And the software also learned whether you have struggled a bit on that, so that when you go in revision, you can recharge and will focus on the specific part that has not been fully addressed the first time around. And this is an example of a practical assignment where you have a question bank and students can actually access, if you want them to, the solutions. So the questions are numerical, so they change like the times of numbers. And you can always get them to see all the solution after they've completed it, so they would know exactly where they've gone wrong. And there are many ways in which you can set it up so that it's not unfair to the students, but it's actually good for their own learning. How this played out? Well, in the this was one of the questions in the module feedback. Please name the one thing in the module which had the most impact on your learning, and 59% mentioned connect. So 59%. So we're talking about more than half of the class mentioned that as the one thing. And here you can read some of the comment that they actually put down and how the reading assignment was helpful, and the fact that you can actually, the textbook will redirect you where you have to read to actually improve on that part. And this, when they talk about the reverse model, I wanted to change it, but then I say, no, let's keep it like as it is. So the reverse model means the flipped class in that term, and how actually this has been well received by the students because that made value of their time, okay? On the lecture side, this is one key part of Connect, is the access of all sorts of reports. So there is a one at risk report that I especially use in the first weeks to identify students that were not immediately engaging to flag any problem. And that's how we identified students that actually have dropped out or withdrawn from university, and those required immediate special attention. And this was at the beginning, not rather at the end when we know that it will be too late. So this is especially important because in our module, we had around 600 and plus students. So it's a good way to provide them feedback and to actually see whether they are all engaging with the module. So if the tailored learning works, where can we go next? So there is something that we started to investigate here under a focus group, okay, that we run here at Pons University. So the funny thing was that this is basically the slides that I presented to the students. Notice students that have never seen me before. I was not lecturing on their module. Okay, so they basically just saw a guy showing up there and presenting them with these slides to ask them to join. So that's what they were supposed to gain. I didn't give chocolate. I didn't give Amazon voucher. I didn't give anything. So there was no party, nothing hidden there. The only thing that appeared is, do you want to employ AI-driven software? Do you want to improve your math skill? And you want to get a reference letter for your employability? That's the only things that I actually on my side was to basically fill in. And for 4 weeks, I had to come on campus in the teaching in a PC lab to actually engage with Alex, which is a new a software. Actually, it's been going on for a few years. We started to pilot it this year, and basically there was spaces limited to 40 students. Now, believe me, I spoke for 5 minutes, okay, in the class. When I went to sit in my seat, I had 50 emails from students that wanted to join basically this thing. So it was just immediate. So basically we went over capacity, and I kindly had to ask some like Sean and others to basically grant us a bit more lenience like with that, and they obliged. So it was actually very positive. So this is the type of thing that you can do with Alex. Alex is actually even more advanced in some respect because it can go literally one by one on each individual student. So if you have a knowledge check where you see what you know, okay, it was like the old check that you would do with your students, like before starting, even in high school, before starting lecturing them to see what they knew, but you couldn't go one by one. So you have to look at an average. Here instead is one by one. So each student, you decide as a lecturer where you want them to take, what you want them to learn, and the software, depending on how they answer some questions in the initial knowledge check, will adapt the pathways for them. So basically you have infinite way that are entirely student dependent to basically get to the final point. And what was surprising is that despite all the, we knew that many people would do it, but how many people will go until the end? 88%. When I showed this data, people were not going to believe me because at the beginning they were skeptical, saying, "Oh yeah, they're probably not going to do it because they're not going to give an incentive. It's not going to be embedded as a coursework now." But we couldn't do that for several reasons. But then they got 88%. I said, "Okay, now you were right. We were wrong." So that's basically how it went down there. And the other thing that I wanted to highlight, we were having these things on a Friday. So October 6th is a Friday. This is the average time spent, okay? So if this is 6 and this is the 13 and this is the 20, and then you have 227, and then moving forward, you see that the peaks are never on the day of actually when people were supposed to be there, because what we actually found, and this was astonishing for us, was that they were actually doing it also the other days. So again, we're talking about things that they have nothing to gain, not in terms of mark, not in terms of Amazon voucher, nothing, and they still kept doing. So it was a very types of engagement. And when we went at the end to collect some material, so Alex software is valuable, and 68% they said it was valuable. Guides me to mathematical concept that I need to improve on. Also, we had 44, basically 80% saying that that was good. They agree or strongly agreed. And it's easy to use, which is another thing, because if it's not easy to use, people won't spend time doing that. And that went basically very well. So some conclusion basically for consideration are around the use of technology, which is actually essential in the way our students now are basically living nowadays their experience at university, and how we can actually use that to tailor their approach. Connect is a tool. Alex is another tool that they can offer this type of tailored support that as human, like as a one lecture for 600, you cannot do. But what you can do is use the technology to basically achieve and reach the students that are most in need when they are most in need, not when it's too late. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Francesco. That was really great to see. And thank you for bringing in Alex as well, which is our maths software. So Alex is very specifically to help the students sort of get up to scratch with them with the math skills. And we've got sort of a version of Alex specifically for engineering, so that it brings in the mathematical concepts that are most pertinent for that area of study. So thank you so much for that run through of what you've been doing, and it's so good to see. Can I ask you now, John, to take over, that we can see what you've been up to?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So that was very good, Francesco. For me, you touched on a lot of really important points, and certainly ones that you gave a comprehensive overview of even how I use Connect. But for me, again, my selfish attitude to all of this is through the lens of myself as the educator, is that, you know, I'm trying to maximize my time for research, and I've got a module a little bit smaller than yours, but you know, in the 400s, and it just takes up a lot of my own time. And it was one of the reasons why I wanted to engage with Connect. But I had other reasons, of course. But to give you context here, it's as everyone on this call in academia, it's such a Jekyll and Hyde career. So you've got the education part, the teaching part, and of course your own research, and you have to try and keep them together, keep them apart, and make sure you have enough time for both. So just to give context, I'm in the University of Limerick here, which is just in the southwest of Ireland, just for those that don't know. I'm course director for biomedical engineering, which is part of a common entry to engineering in our university. But that common entry has a keystone module here, this engineering science module, which I teach now. And that's where a lot of my issues arose in terms of balancing my time for both academic pursuits. So what happened to me? How do I balance these things, and what I think is important? And I know Francisco talked about it there, which is how do I engage engineering students? And as the first question kind of alluded to, today's student, it has changed from my own time, and I have to change with that. So I'm going to walk you through the 6 years plus that I've been teaching this specific module, and how things have changed for me. So that's the first thing. There are questions that I wanted to highlight, but I'll just focus on the first one. And a lot of it is about, as a good engineer, gathering data from the class, acting on that data and reflecting on it and trying to fix it. So you'll just see all these different changes that I've made throughout the years when I inherited this module and where I am today. So how to engage engineering students is just a question I ask almost every year, and how Connect and other solutions really helped. So to give you context, as this module, engineering science, which is just mechanics, has 430 students, and it was brought in because another module that was in year 2, there was a large failure rate, and something had to be done. So this module was created in 2017 to stop this nearly 50% failure rate, to give a more fundamental and foundational understanding. So I started it in 2017 and the failure rate stayed the same. So I was doing something wrong. I wasn't really getting the students to engage. And that was the big problem with this failure rate, is that students just weren't engaging in the content early. And then once they got to the end, it was a huge problem. So as Francesco alluded to, it's about getting that at-risk student cohort and getting them to engage in the module early. And this was something that I was failing at. So I was trying to act on that and figure out what can I do. And every year in our surveys, the students would say real life examples are the thing that really gets us to engage. So that was my first thing to do, was okay, try and engage these students as much as possible. And to do this, I'll ask engaging questions back at them, flip the classroom towards them, and see if they can come up with questions that help them. And to give you context, as I said, this is a common entry. So I have engineering students with aeronautical, civil, biomedical, electrical, and so on backgrounds. So no one example that I could use and create would be suitable for them. So I had to ensure that everyone is engaged and felt that the degree was for them, this module was for them. So in my class, I start off with examples across all the different engineering spectrum, be it biomedical, mechanical, so on and so forth. And I thought this was it. This was the answer to my problems, to get students to engage early, create problems, questions that would interest them. So then I had to ask, well, it's fine doing it. How do I understand, did it work or not? So that was my number one problem, gathering data. How do I figure this out? How do I know that they're getting better year on year? And the issue that I had at the time is that to get students to engage and not just have this lecturer speaking at the front, we had this notebook that had blanks in it, a very old school way of doing things, so that they're in class, they're engaging, they fill out the pieces that are missing, which I didn't really like at the time. But a great measure from this was that how many people bought this book, and I could never get above 70%. So that means 30% of the class are walking in with no notebook, no nothing, not engaged. So this was just a terrible way of doing things, and a terrible way of even gathering data. So I had to change in 2019 to figure out, can we do something? And of course, there are other ways to assess. I had assignments and one midterm and lab reports, but all of them were ways of and data points of figuring out, when do people engage, how do they engage. But the problem with this is, let's say for the midterm, if someone didn't turn up or got 0%, I'd have to go through all this data, pinpoint a student, figure out, okay, did they engage? Did they get 0? And go through this big Excel file of finding out students and commonality between all these students. And ultimately, it was quite inaccurate, and very much so at different moments in time throughout the module when it was probably too late. So again, I had to figure out, well, what's an alternative? So I suggested to the students that to replace this notebook with an ebook, literally give them a PDF version of this and see if that helps engagement. And the feedback was that wouldn't fix the problem. Even if I gave them everything for free, they more than likely wouldn't download it. And so sending an ebook just wasn't a sufficient way of doing things. So how did I incentivize these students? And that's ultimately where Connect comes in. So I'm just going to skip this one here. So that's where I met a rep from McGraw Hill. And I know COVID-19 was an impetus for this, but it was something that I was interested in before then. And I was one of the first people in UL to engage in this. And it gave me this software, this tool to fix all the problems that I had. So I could gather data daily. I could act on that data daily, and I could reflect and change basically every week aspects of my module, rather than relying on a notebook and when people purchased it, relying on assignments and seeing who engaged in those assignments or not. So this is something that was just done for me, rather than me digging through all this data that I generated myself. So this is what it looks like for me. I could create these topics of throughout the whole semester. Students could see what was coming up ahead of time. They could engage in the topics ahead of time. They could know when these topics were meant to be done. It just laid everything out for them. in a way that I could not only tailor their experience, but also understand whether they were carrying out the assignments or not. So for example, if we just zoom in on topic 2 here, I know Francesco has shown all of this already, but for me, I could break it into subtopics, making sure that it was never like 30, 40-minute assignments. They were all just 5-minute little pockets of data of information. And just like Francesco, would be, let's say, a reading assignment followed by, you know, a little test or a little kind of application that they could carry out. And with very small marks being assigned to them, it was something that they definitely engaged in quite a bit. But more importantly, I could see what was happening. I believe this is a video which I hope everyone can see. But this is what it would look like. And I know Francesco showed something quite similar, but this is what a student sees. This is what they read. But more importantly, if it goes there, the yellow is what I'm highlighting as an important topic. And further to that, they can get examined on these concepts. So the yellow is a concept, and then they can be asked questions. I believe it's 2 questions per concept. And they asked all these questions. You can see now in this topic here, there's 13 concepts. And more importantly, they can rate how confident they are in the answer, which all feeds back to me, because I can see how confident people are, and usually engineers are overly confident. But it is really something that they engage with that helps them figure out what's necessary in that moment in time, so they don't have to worry about what I need to do this week. It's all laid out for them. So yeah, so from that, and I know you touched on this before, but I can see from an assignment who did it, who didn't do it, how long they took, and more importantly, you can see it here, whether people were underconfident. And as you can see, there's very few engineers who are underconfident, and then there's 14% are overconfident, which is not surprising at all. So it just gives me an idea at a granular point of view, so from a topic level all the way out to the overarching module itself. So instead of me digging through who bought what notebook, looking at all my midterm results, this is laid out for me. Every topic that I showed you there, here it is. And I can see and identify who is doing what. And this is the zoomed out version. So these are all my assignments on the bottom here. You can see, yes, there's reds there, usually the quizzes, but the greens are different topics and reading assignments. As you can see here, this is 2020 when I first did it. I wasn't too, I didn't really know what I was doing at the time, but I got a little bit better. You can see the greens are starting to get bigger because people are getting more and more engaged in the concept of it. But you can see that there's here on the top right, you can see how many 304 students out of 365 are quite good. 36 keep watch, and then the 25 are all the people who pulled out of the course. And then up to 2023, you can see now lots of green. Now all the students are engaged, everyone's on board, and it really shows. You can see my number of students is increasing as the years go by, but it just shows how I can gather data and act on data very, very quickly and highlight students who are not engaging throughout. Yeah, so that's a really good way to end, because I'm conscious of time, but we can probably touch on this second point later on, Roz.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, indeed. So the work that you've been doing with continuous assessment with Connect is really, really interesting. And I know that you've got some really great viewpoints on sort of allowing students the freedom to fail and things like that. So yes, it would be really great to come back to that if we can before the end. That'd be amazing. But it's so great to see the transformation you've been able to enact then with that course, from a point where they were, you know, the dropout rate was enormous. And you weren't getting them to engage at all, to a situation where you completely turn that on its head, with the use of a kind of a hybrid solution, really, and having that data, those data points to help you kind of target very specifically those individuals who need more help. So I'm going to pass to Sean quickly, who's going to just have a little look sort of under the hood of Connect, as it were, and just show you
before you do that, if you don't mind. I'm so sorry,
but not at all, please.
Just to be very, what's the word I'm looking for, cruel as an academic. I went from having a grade 400 exams, like literally going crazy over Christmas, to downloading an Excel file exported by Connect, and within 20 minutes having the grades for every single student. I can't, as an academic, I cannot express how brilliant that is. to be able to take 2 weeks almost worth of grading down to 20 minutes. Unheard of.
That is quite transformational, isn't it?
John, you might be
yeah.
doing something wrong, because it took me seconds. So
I was trying to
there should be
be.
something. There should
I
be
was-
something like the way we set the tests.
Yeah, yeah.
But
No,
yeah, share
I
your
get you. I get you.
feelings is
Yeah.
immediate. And also, like I experienced the same with the pass rate of students even on the same module. We spent like 1 year preparing a crazy amount of notes, were 160 pages of notes. It was like was something incredible. Students were super happy about that, and then 40% failed the exams. 2 years down the road, implementation of Connect, etc. Last year, we decreased significantly the failure at the exam to I think like by 3/4. So we basically reduce that failing rate, and then at receipt, basically we got almost all of them on board. So it was actually great to see how that implementation simplified and streamlined not only our life but also student life, it turns out.
I mean, this is music to our ears, because of course, our whole raison d'etre is to help improve student outcomes, but also to sort of make instructors' lives easier. It's that sort of the dual aim there. So it's really great to hear that that it is having that impact on the two fronts. So I'll just.
Do you want us to answer questions first, or do you want to go to Sean?
I was going to say,
should we do? Yeah.
John, are you happy for me to read out the questions and then you and Francesco can answer them?
Yep.
Is that okay, Fab? So the first point that was asked was when you both talked about students experiencing platform fatigue and all the different platforms that students are faced with when they come to university. How did you get them to engage with the new piece of software, i.e. Connect?
I'll take that if you don't mind.
Yep.
So for me, it's the first thing is money. So in Ireland, the system is the student pays rather than the faculty covers it. So it's a tough sell. But I then show them the cost if they buy the physical book, be it Amazon or wherever, and it's usually in the hundreds. And then I show them the cost of what this book is. And thankfully from McGraw Hill, they integrated across different modules. So I'm the first of 3 modules. And the way it works is we're able to connect those. We use the exact same book. So they have access to the same book across not just my module, but another module. So they're getting, a 2-for-1 deal here. But I tell them in the cost how much it is in terms of pints. So then they kind of go, okay, it's only worth 5 pints. So that's totally okay. So they usually figure that out and realize, okay, it's not as expensive as we make it out to be. So that's usually how I get them to engage. And then the second they hear that the quizzes are part of it as well, and that points are going to part of it, that usually you get 100% engagement in it.
Oh, I think that I can offer like the mirrored version of that, because in the UK instead, the faculty covers this, at least in our institution. So it's the faculty that covers that cost. So you would think that students are over enthusiastic of actually using. They are not. So the only way that we saw, and we had data to support this statement, is that basically you link that to a summative assignment. So the fact that you have summative assignments that they can basically get marks out of it, that's the clear boost that basically you get the entire students cohort to actually do it, which is remarkable. So if you try even to give it for free, but is not part of a summative assessment, you will see a very short number of them doing it. Instead, if you actually embed it, because that's when they see the actual embed that is fully embedded in the module, is when you decide, okay, if I'm setting up my module like that, so that you have assignment that you can basically work towards your final examination, and you can get marked, then your time, which is valuable as my time, then we kind of meet. We have this deal that we are both investing our time for the learning, and we definitely would have more students to basically actually do that. And in terms of also, there is not very much work on the academic side to actually show them how to use it, because there are plenty of resources. The staff, Sean, Gary, and others are always super supportive in basically helping out. And tech requests, when, in the unlikely event that there was a problem, were answered, within 24 hours at the latest. So is this type of, is the whole system that works. So it works for the students, works for us, for academics. It basically works.
Thank you. And then gentlemen, the last question before we move on, which is one that does come up quite a bit when we're talking about Connect, is one of the callers is asking, what's the significant advantage of Connect compared to standard Learn or Moodle learning environment, which has already got resources, quizzes, and the like. And there's also the ability to generate data, obviously, from their LMS. So again, if briefly, you could both maybe give a slight overview as to what is compelling and what you found using Connect.
But yeah, do you want me to go first, John? So we use Canvas in our institution. So which basically, you know, it can have access to a very similar thing, but quite not. We had another focus group, because we like focus group here, and to basically try and figure out across different platforms around fluid mechanics. So I'm not talking about also Connect. We also evaluated others with the students, which one they would see from their perspective that was like better for them, and what was also better for us. What we can tell is if you try to do those things and to embed it in Canvas or to embed it in Moodle, etc., it's still a lot of time to actually get those things set up, because it's not like ready for you. If you want to change something the year after, you have to go all over again, and you never will have access to the same level of data. Like the capillarity of data that you can get down to individual students completing the individual task is remarkable, that you cannot get anywhere else. And there is something that I always say, it is something that is kind of unique to Connect, is the smart book functionality. I'm always very fond, so I hate the concept of people understanding only bullet points. It's something that I cannot get myself over. So it's like the most of the knowledge and of what we have access is in books. Now we call them textbook, we can call them books, we can call them whatever. So we have to learn how to interact with those. So is there a way that we actually get that types of that simplicity that can help us understand how a textbook thing? And that's where the smart book come in. And the fact that it's not as just a simple ebook that you can actually sleep on it. Yeah, you with the smart book, you actually have to answer this question. You have to demonstrate that you actually recharge and that you have actually understood the concept. And that is down to individual student. You cannot do any of this with Canvas. And I tell you, you know why I tell you that? Because I tried and didn't work. So we tried for 1 year trying to figure that out. It was a lot of time to basically adjust it. It was even if you want to be really blunt and just get screenshots out of it, even if you want to add the solution, still you don't get the same thing. You cannot have numerical answer. I mean, it will take you ages only to set it up. And if you have some new questions that come around, or you want to change a bit something, you have to go all over again. Connect instead as a platform and as everything will give you access to a lot of data and a lot of question bank and solution and the smart book. So the fact that student can engage with the book.
Thank you. John, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, just echoing that. I know colleagues that did all the question banks in Sakai, a version of Sakai and Moodle, and our university changed to Brightspace. There was no way it transferred. These people had decades worth of questions just gone. Whereas for me, I connect and I pick and choose my question banks. It's unbelievable. I do little effort and all the questions are there for me. I can even edit them if I wanted to and everything. So I have this book that's connected to my quizzes. They recognize the questions that they're getting. They recognize the way and the method, and especially in maths, you need terminologies to stay the same. So if I'm creating questions or have questions from other books, and if I have this book that they're reading that has totally different terminologies, it can be very confusing. So I agree, yes, Moodle, SmartBook, all of these different things have this data gathering for sure, but none of it's all connected like this. And certainly I don't have to make any of the questions, which is positive for me. Okay.
And I think some more of those sort of compelling advantages will probably come across now in Sean's presentation also, where I know you're going to delve a bit deeper into SmartBook and to the algorithmic questions and things like that. So over to you, Sean. We've got about 10 minutes left. So.
Fab. Can everyone see my screen, Ros?
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. So yeah, so like I said, although we haven't got a great deal of time today, part of my role is just to reinforce the key points that Francesco and John have raised today. So first and foremost, if you've never come across Connect before, easiest way of thinking about it is it's an online platform that houses digital versions of all our titles with a plethora of ready-made course content to support your teaching and learning. I like to think of it kind of like a jigsaw analogy where we've got all these assignments, resources, tools, and each one of those is essentially a jigsaw piece. And as an academic consultant, a huge part of my role and our team at McGraw Hill's role is to make sure that all of the jigsaw pieces within Connect that you're using have relevance and value to your course and program of study. Like the gentlemen have shown you, any SmartBook assignment that you set students, there'll be the duration. We know, like John alluded to, the sweet spot any more than kind of, John really goes granular, but anything more than kind of 45 minutes, students don't tend to engage with. So again, ideally, we keep everything around or no more than the 45-minute mark. You know, there would be a due date. It would tell them how many concepts they needed to cover. And like I said, I won't spend too much time on the SmartBook for the simple reason both John and Francesco have shown you how it works with the key concepts. They've also shown you, and one of the things which is really important here, all of the questions that are generated to ensure that the students understand the concepts within the chapters. Everything's automatically graded. So again, you know, once we've built it with you, there's no work for the instructors to look through this other than the data and taking a look at the data that comes from it. One thing which I did want to touch upon, there are also, we call them application-based activities or ABAs. And what these allow students to do is they have an opportunity to apply their knowledge and understanding to real-world problems. They're extremely interactive activities. And again, everything is automatically graded. So what I just wanted to show you there, again, there's different times for the tasks, different difficulty levels. And if you were to click on any one of those activities, it would give you a breakdown of all the key concepts that they will focus on. Once a student is in a ABA, again, it's kind of like a rolling screen. There's information. They click continue. They'd be presented with a range of problems and challenges, and based on their answers, it would then drive them into different parts of the simulation. So again, it's extremely adaptive and personalized. Assessment and reporting tools, you know, could spend the whole afternoon looking at them. But it's pretty much exactly what, again, Francesco and John have said, and it's exactly what it says on the tin. So if you think of multiple choice questions, short and essay type questions, algorithmic problem sets, again, the bulk of this is automatically graded, but again, there's some manually graded questions. But the great thing is when you're building question banks, revision tools, assessments, all these different types of things, Connect allows you to filter. So you might want everything to be automatically graded. It can be done. Again, you were shown some algorithmic problems previously. One of the great ways of using these as well is the numbers obviously change for every student. But also if you set up a kind of revision for the students, every time the student or the individual student attempted these questions, the numbers would change for them as well. So they could, you know, they could practice multiple times. I think I was trying to think of an adjective, but yeah, useful data is probably really important to kind of hammer home. It's not just data for data's sake. So again, like John said, at any time, you can see which students are doing everything you want them to. Obviously the greens, yellows, the ones we need to keep watch on, and then these at-risk students who aren't engaging with the course that you've built for them. Something that I read recently, which I thought was really salient in this type of discussion, is students, particularly in year one, don't have the confidence often to come forth and say they're struggling because they feel like they're in university, they should understand and they should be confident. And obviously we know they're not. What this allows you to do is it allows you to see which students are struggling so that you can reach out to them and schedule one-to-one time and just find out more and obviously find out ways that you can help them. Again, John touched upon all the different ways that and all the different reports that you can run. Starter for 10, just a couple of points to finish that I think are really, really important. I wish I'd spoken to John because before I came up with this slide, because I always think I never know which way to say it. You can either think of Connect and using Connect effectively as creating time or giving you time back, whereas I should have spoken to John and I could have used engineering more time for your priorities. So I hope you don't want me, I'll steal that, John, for the future. But yeah, it obviously, once you've built a great course in Connect, it allows you then to have more time, if that's one-to-one or on your priorities within the program. This is a really, really important one, and it's come up twice for me recently. You can build solid course foundations. So I was contacted recently by one of my institutions, a member of staff who led a module was on long-term sick. They weren't very well. And the instructor who was asked to step in and take the course didn't really have anything because the instructor, it was all on paper. And obviously they weren't in, they couldn't be reached. Again, Connect ensures there's no bottlenecks to courses and to information. So if you've built your course in Connect at any time, any instructor obviously could come in and could take the course. And then something else that came up recently was this kind of movement, should we say, to institutions delivering courses either online to international students or setting up kind of like satellite hubs abroad where content and programs are delivered. Again, this democratizes the learning process so that no matter where the student is in the world, you know, they access the same information through a platform like Connect. Again, think back to those jigsaw pieces. It's bespoke. It's not like a traditional print textbook where, you know, kind of like one size fits all. We really do dovetail everything that we offer and everything that we build for an institution to their learning objectives and what they're trying to achieve. I still work at Cardiff University, so this is a real big one for me. Everything that students encounter and work with in their kind of like everyday life, everything is real-time feedback. So again, I really think it's important that everything that we offer students today mirrors, you know, the world that they're kind of in 24/7. So again, the fact that everything can be automatically graded, everything can drive the students to what they need, again, mirrors what they experience in their day-to-day lives outside the classroom. And if we're, you know, facing up to reality, it's an ideal tool for students with part-time jobs. Saw a recent stat that said 40% of students now work 16 hours or more per week. And a lot of that is obviously to afford to carry on attending university. So again, I'm really passionate about building courses for students that takes that into account and doesn't hinder students that have to work throughout their university degree. So hopefully you're sufficiently intrigued to obviously see Connect. And although I haven't touched upon Alex as well, the mathematical tool that Francesco spoke about, what we've done is we've built a mini course through Connect for you to have a little look at. So what I was hoping, Roz, is if the people on the call, if they want to see either Connect or Alex firsthand, if they can write, well, ideally, hopefully both. But if Connect is what you want to see, or Alex, if you can type that into the chat box, and I'll make sure that you're sent information, login credentials, and we put you in touch with the academic consultant for your institution to learn more about the platforms. But like I said, yeah, last but no means least, all of us at McGraw Hill genuinely care, not just about instructors, but also about students. I'd say that nearly everyone working at McGraw Hill has got a background in education. I used to be a primary school teacher myself. So I'm always conscious that I sometimes refer to students as kids, which I haven't done today. But like I said, we're all extremely passionate about education. It's not just a transactional sale. I want to be out on campus. I want to be working with instructors like yourselves, building the best possible courses. And I know that's, again, reflected throughout the organization. So yeah, thank you ever so much. And I'll stop sharing my screen, Ross.
Amazing. Thank you, Sean. So just to recap, that what you're talking about there is that you've built a sort of small course within Connect that if people sort of just put yes in the chat, we can send them details. They can log in and they can experience just a small sort of module of Connect as though they were a student, right? So they just get to sort of have a little walk around the platform, have a little play around. Not too much in there, so it wouldn't take them very long. It's quite a low touch, low sort of effort type activity, just so they can really play around with some of the things that we've been talking about today. So please do, thank you, and please do pop yes in the chat if you're interested in that. Oh, John, yes. Sorry.
I just want to add that McGraw Hill are brilliant. There's someone with you the whole time. So I know one of the questions was the implementation. So in year one, it was hard to get my head around, but I had someone there. So regardless of the question, as long as you ask in advance ahead of your start of your semester, there's someone there to help you. And there are times always available. I can just click in. It was Gary initially and then Bevan, but I can sort out little 15-30 minute chats and they help me along. And actually sometimes Bevan would just set up the module for me and I tweak. So it was quite good. So whereas now I feel I'm more independent now, but at the start it was quite dependent.
There is one thing that if I can add, so in terms of support, so we used Connect for a class test when the students had only one attempt. They had to carry it out there for 400 and plus students. I was scared, I must admit, because that's when things can go terribly wrong. And instead, there was no problem. If probably we identified only one problem, was sorted out within minutes. So because with the people at McGraw Hill, we said, can we have someone on the, on call there? So yeah, I'm here. We just had one instance was resolved like in matters of minutes. Immediately picked up, always problem. So it's also, you can take risks. So that's actually the important things, because sometimes, if you want to be too much conservative, we don't do what is best also for the students. But if we can take some risks, because we know that the environment around is very supportive and is readily available. And yes, it takes really little effort to actually build a module with the availability of all those data and all those resources.
Thank you so much, guys. I could talk to you all day, and I know we didn't even get, we weren't able to come back to you, John, about assessment. I know both of you have used Connect for assessment really effectively. Maybe that's for another future webinar. Perhaps I can tempt you back in a couple of months' time. I just want to say a huge thank you to you both for your time today. And thanks to the audience for coming along and seeing us through and listening to us. Please do get in touch if you have any questions. I don't know that we've got to all the questions. I think we got to most of them, but please do get in touch with myself or with Sean. I don't think we've got a screen to pop up our contact details, have we? But if you've got your original invite email and you reply to that, we'll get it. So yes, I guess it only remains for me to say thank you once again and to let everybody go back to their days, and hopefully we can speak to you anon. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you
you
very much, everyone.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.